PA in this room or no? Give us a second, gentlemen.
Sure. Time, Steve.
Tripod down.
Ed, good to have you back.
Hey.
Is there a loss?
We are live.
Okay.
Everybody ready? Steve, you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Welcome, everybody. This is actually the first event we've had in this room, so we'll see how it goes this morning. Thank you for coming. We're here to provide you with an update regarding the investigation by this office, the Rhode Island State Police, and the Central Falls Police Department into the incident that occurred at the Wyatt Detention Center in Central Falls last Wednesday on August 14th. I want to introduce the people standing with me today. To my immediate left are State Police Colonel James Manni and Captain John Alfred. To my right are Central Falls Police Department Colonel Daniel Barzakowski and Lieutenant Frank Rodriguez, who have been leading this investigation on behalf of their respective agencies. And I'm really appreciative of their partnership. I think one of the things that often gets lost when we're doing really any case, but particularly cases like this, which are involve a lot of activity, involve a lot of facts, is the partnership between prosecutors and police and detectives. And as this case, I think, indicates, that is a relationship and a partnership that begins in the immediate aftermath of an incident like this one. And we're not going to be announcing the conclusions of our investigation today because that investigation is not complete. That said, I don't live in a bubble. I understand that there's a lot of interest in what went on there last week. And given the nature of the incident itself and that level of public interest, I believe it's important to discuss the steps that we're taking in connection with the investigation and to provide an approximate timeline regarding when that investigation will be complete. Let me set for you the stage a little bit as to how we got involved in this case. This office, at least, in the immediate aftermath of the incident on Wednesday night, early Thursday morning, Central Falls Police Department reached out to Jim Baum in my office as a point of contact, and they began to discuss this matter. I first became aware of it, frankly, through the media in the late hours of Wednesday night, early Thursday morning, and so my first call on Thursday was to Colonel Manni. In fact, I made that call before I even left my home, and the reason for that is it was pretty clear to me that this office needed to get involved early on in this investigation. This was not going to be sort of one of those routine matters where the police do an investigation and bring it to our office for review. This was something that we needed to be engaged in actively right away. The state police recognized, Colonel Manni, to his credit, recognized that he needed to be involved, his agency needed to be involved. And Central Falls Police was great about our involvement. And so our investigation began immediately that morning. I tasked the criminal chief, Steve Dambrick, to go to Central Falls. Jim Baum was there as well early on that morning. They went there, they met with state police detectives, they met with members of the Central Falls Police Department, and they began doing the investigative work, which remains ongoing. The investigation has continued full speed in the days since, and as I said, it remains ongoing. Now, in general, I've said this many times before, the faster we work, the better it is for everybody, and frankly, it's better for an investigation. And we're moving as quickly as possible in this instance. But what is most important, what is absolutely most important, is that we get this right. And the fact is, as many of you know, this incident last Wednesday involved many, many people and several distinct acts. All the evidence that pertains to those acts and the individuals involved needs to be gathered and reviewed. In any investigation, witnesses and the information they provide is critical. With respect to this incident, there were many, many witnesses. Not every witness saw everything. Not every witness saw what they saw from the same vantage point. Certain individuals have reported, directly and indirectly, contact with the vehicle operated that night and with what is commonly known as pepper spray. To reach the right conclusions, it is imperative that we speak to every witness who was there that night and to every witness who reports injury. Because to the extent we consider charges, the injuries are highly significant. To date, we have interviewed 31 witnesses, and there remain at least 20 witnesses to interview going forward. So we've got a lot of work to do. But let me be clear, we want to speak with anyone that has information regarding what occurred that night. what they saw, what they heard, and what injuries they suffered. We believe at this point that we have interviewed or received statements from most of the recipient witnesses. That said, anyone who wants to provide information, including video footage, and that is critical. There's a lot of video footage out there, some from the people in this room. We're reviewing all of that footage, but to the extent anyone has additional footage, we would ask that they alert one of the investigators. At the Rhode Island State Police, it's Detective Robert Hopkins, who can be reached at 401-764-5539. At Central Falls, it's Lieutenant Frank Rodriguez, 401-616-2508. And at this office, it's Investigator Mark Blair, 401-274-4400, extension 2236. And one of the reasons I assigned Mark Blair to this case, he's an experienced investigator, but also we received a lot of phone calls here at the office. And we welcome those calls. If those calls do come here, and I'd encourage people in the first instance to go to one of those police agencies I mentioned, the State Police or Central Falls, but people can call here and we will get their information to the investigative team. As I mentioned, there has been a substantial amount of video footage involved here, and we need to obtain all of it and review it. Some of that video footage is from the Wyatt Detention Center itself. Other footage, as you know, was taken by media outlets. Still other footage was taken by individuals who just happened to be there that night. Some of that video is available on social media. We're still obtaining, reviewing, and evaluating all of that footage. There are two things here that we're evaluating. One is the operation of the vehicle itself. The second is the deployment of what is commonly known as pepper spray. As I've stated, that evaluation is underway with all possible speed. But we are committed to getting this right. And getting it right, particularly in this instance, given the volume of information that is available to us, requires doing it with deliberation. It's my expectation that this investigation will wrap up within several weeks. I don't think it will be much longer than that, and we'll have more information to share at that time. I thank you for coming, and I'm happy to take a few questions.
Attorney General, you mentioned the pepper spray. How many guards deployed pepper spray, and what's happening to those guards? Is that part of the investigation?
It is part of it. It is part of what we're evaluating, is the deployment of pepper spray, who deployed it, the circumstances under which it was deployed. And that is part of what we're evaluating, and that's why, as I said, there's a lot of activity that went on that night involving a lot of people. And so to make sure that we have a full understanding of it and understand what, if any, action we should take going forward, we need to know everything that happened.
What's next to the corrections officer who was allegedly driving that truck? We understand he resigned, but from what I've heard, he's had a whole career as a corrections officer elsewhere. Is he collecting a pension?
I have no idea what his personal circumstances are. What we're focused on, again, is the activity that evening, what actions were taken by particular individuals, and again, this is a criminal investigation, and so we're investigating what, if anything, should be taken, what if any steps this office should take moving forward. Again, we won't have those conclusions until we have all the information.
Were there any federal officers on the scene?
I don't believe there were. No.
One of the guards identified himself as a federal officer on video. Is that a crime?
I can't speak to that, Steve, but what I can say, let me define what I understand a federal officer to be. In my experience as a former U.S. attorney and a former line prosecutor as an assistant U.S. attorney, to me a federal officer is an FBI agent or a DEA agent or an ATF agent. The employment status or the peace officer status, if you will, of Wyatt correctional officers is not something at the moment I want to comment on, and I'm frankly at this point I'm not certain how germane it is to what it is specifically we're investigating.
General, what is it a crime to pound on a vehicle with somebody in it, or to just try to impede somebody's progress?
Well, look, there's a lot going on out there that night, Bill. Certainly, if you obstruct a roadway, for example, a right of egress or access, that could, in theory, be a crime. I don't want to get into too much of the specifics here, but I will tell you that our focus, our principal focus, is on the operation of the vehicle in question and the deployment of pepper spray.
Have investigators spoken with Captain Woodworth?
I don't want to comment on what specific steps we've taken, Ed. So I really can't comment on that.
How many people were injured? Do you know how many were?
Well, we're trying to determine that, frankly, and that's why it's important that anyone who reports injury gives a statement. Now, we have reached, I believe, everyone who has been injured, but there have been, I'll be frank, there have been some conflicting reports as to the extent of the injuries, and the extent of the injuries is important to whatever decisions we make going forward.
General, you
common
mentioned the
for-
obstruction of a roadway and egress,
sorry.
looking at that potentially as a crime, so are we talking about the potential for criminal activity amongst the protesters?
Yeah, I have to say that's not the focus of what we're looking at right now, Kate, frankly. You know, what concerns me and what concerned me that evening, again, is the operation of the vehicle and the deployment of pepper spray. And by saying that, I don't mean to forecast where I think we're going to be. I mean, that's the point of making sure we have everything. I think it is a mistake. I think it is a mistake for a prosecutor to leap to conclusions before they have everything. And let me try to put this in practical terms for you. So as soon as, and without getting into this case, as soon as this office charges a case, we have an obligation to turn over all of the information at our disposal to anyone who happens to be charged. In any case, I'm not talking about this case in particular. If we don't have everything, we can't turn it over. If we can't turn it over, we can't comply with our discovery obligations. If we can't comply with our discovery obligations, we're not acting ethically as lawyers and prosecutors. So that's why in a case as complicated as this one, even though sometimes to the outside world, they may think conclusions are obvious, I don't necessarily agree, we have to proceed with deliberation so that we get it right, so that whatever conclusions we make, if they are in fact at some point to go forward, that we're prepared to go forward, that remains to be seen.
Is it legally sanctioned for a non-public police agency to go out into public property like we saw that night and just go after protesters on public space?
Look, you know, you're asking a question which involves both the law and the facts. The issue here for us is to determine what the facts are and put that in the context of the law. And so I'm not prepared to draw any conclusions, either in general or specific at this point.
There were people yesterday calling for the state to close Wyatt. Does the state have any authority in that matter involving a quasi-public entity like the Wyatt?
Yeah, Ian, I haven't really dived into that at all. I mean, our focus here is on the investigation on principally the two courses of activity I've already mentioned. So I haven't looked into that. I haven't carefully studied it. You know, we have been working, the team has been working really hard on gathering these facts. As you might imagine, to pull all this video, which is not complete, to interview 30 witnesses, to take audio tape statements from them, and we have 20 others in the pipeline. When this incident happened last Thursday, has required a lot of work on behalf of the on the part of the investigators. They're working really hard. We're just not ready to draw any conclusions yet.
You've appealed for people to come forward. Can you put a time frame around your investigation? I mean,
Yeah.
is it going to be open-ended or?
No, I don't think so, Steve. I mean, I'm really committed to getting this done quickly. It's why Steve Damberg and Jim Baum have been working with the investigators, you know, nearly full-time on this. I know the investigators have been. It's our priority right now to get this done as quickly as possible. I recognize the interest in this matter. That's why, frankly, we're holding this press conference. So, frankly, unusual for me to do it at this stage in a proceeding. I probably wouldn't be doing it in a typical case. But I think it's important that the public know that we're working hard. There's a lot of work to do. And frankly, to let people know that if they have information, we are interested in talking to them. And if they have video, we're very interested in seeing that as well.
Fair to call this an atypical case?
Well, certainly, yeah. I think it's atypical from a lot of perspectives, Steve. Yeah, I do. And I think that's why it's incumbent on us here to let the public know that we're on it and we're working hard. And I hope to have some conclusions in the relatively near future.
The night of the incident, did either the Central Falls or State Police respond to the jail?
I'm going to let Colonel Manni, I think, respond to that.
Thank you, General. I'll go over the timeline of the State Police involvement in this incident. So on Wednesday, the 14th, August 14th, a lieutenant from the Central Falls Police Department reached out to a supervisor at the Lincoln Woods Barracks to make them aware that there was a possible peaceful demonstration that evening at the Wyatt Detention Center. The State Police obviously would assist any police department with any request. At that point, the Central Falls Police Department, and I'm not speaking for the chief, he can comment on this, gave us a brief overview of their emergency action plan, which we were satisfied with. In an abundance of caution, the night supervisor, lieutenant, and 2 state police cruisers with 2 troopers in each car responded to the area to patrol in close proximity to the Wyatt Detention Center in the event there was an issue. That was the involvement of the state police that night.
That was it?
That was it.
So that's two people, one car, two?
There were 3 state police cruisers with 5 troopers, 1 lieutenant in 1 car, 2 cruisers with 2 troopers in each.
At the time of the truck entering the walkway, there were no police officers nearby.
There were no state police officers.
And there were no Central Falls police officers nearby either. They were way up the street and not actively there. And
I'll let the chief answer.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead. Thank you.
Chief, can you talk about your department's involvement in that?
Yeah, we had contact throughout the evening with the organizers, state police and Wyatt. We had a plan in place to provide public safety to the protesters. That plan involved not only people there, but a large number of people that were walking back to James Park where this event started, and ensuring everyone's safety.
Mm-hmm. There was were the police under orders from Mayor Diosa not to intervene with the protest?
No, police officers were under orders from myself to handle it accordingly, and they were in contact with me the entire time.
Are you satisfied with the response of your officers?
I believe my officers acted appropriately and responsibly. Just an unfortunate incident that occurred that we're going to work together to ensure the public trust.
You've had other incidents at the jail, haven't you? Excuse me? You've had other incidents of a somewhat similar nature at the jail.
Yes, sir, yeah.
Was it appropriate for the correctional officers to try to be dealing with the protesters that were blocking the parking lot, or should that have been handled by your department?
I'm going to not speak on that because of the investigation, so at this time I really can't comment on that.
Is anyone here to speak on behalf of the corrections officers or the Wyatt?
No, there's no one here to speak on behalf of the Wyatt or the correctional officers. Answer your question.
Despite that, General, are you familiar with a continuum of response that's required by the Wyatt employees in this case? Have you been able to evaluate at all whether pepper spray was appropriate at all or anything like that?
Yeah, well, that's what we're involved. That's what we're involved in evaluating right now. So, again, to go over what it is we're looking at the operation of the vehicle that evening, and then the deployment of the pepper spray under what circumstances, whether or not it was appropriate. Those are all things that are require review, and so. As you can imagine, I mean, you followed this story, you wouldn't be here if you had not. There was a lot going on that night, and there's a lot to sort out, and there's a lot of information to gather. Again, I want to emphasize this, because this comes up in every case that we do. I've been doing this for a long time, and if you are not prepared after you've made a decision to provide the information that supports that decision, you cannot function ethically and responsibly as a prosecutor. The day I make a decision, whether it be, in any case, whether it be to charge or not charge, but particularly when there's a decision to charge, in any case, I'm not talking about this investigation, we have to be in a position to turn over every piece of evidence. If we don't have it ourselves, obviously we can't turn it over. So to do this job right, to make sure we're not, in any case, I'm not talking about this one, in any matter, if you don't want to undercharge, overcharge, or have to amend a charge, or dismiss a case, and sometimes that has to happen. But if you want to minimize the possibility of that happening, you have to have all the information before you make your decision. Because it's incumbent on you to have that information, you can make the right decision, and then turn it over to the defense. So that's a general statement about how we approach our most complicated cases. Now, some cases are pretty simple. You get a DWI, you pretty much know what happened on the road. Right then and there, you got your information, and it's done in 24 hours. This is not that kind of matter, and so we want to make sure that we get it right. Getting it right means having everything.
Can you talk about what you've seen so far, what some of the possible charges could be? And so you can't? I can't. And can you talk about how many people are being investigated?
I can't.
Even roughly?
I don't mean to channel my inner Belichick here, but I cannot.
Excuse me, stay asked a question to the police chief about James Diosa, but what about Regenberg inciting to be arrested, inciting to riot? Regenberg is a troublemaker. He has a question that is James Diosa responsible for the policeman acting that night? What about Regenberg?
Yeah, I'm really not going to get into the conduct of people involved here beyond what I've already said.
So
thank you for the
you
question.
said that you're not really clear on what the extent of the injuries are. Can you give us any kind of a rough idea? How serious were the injuries? How many people?
I can't, Bill. One of the things that we're interested in, obviously, we've spoken to what I believe is the universe of people who have reported injuries.
Is anybody in the hospital?
Not to my knowledge, no. But again, look, there are some HIPAA issues here. I want to make sure that we have all the information. I'll explain why that's important. Let me explain why it's important. Again, I'm not talking about this matter, but when you're evaluating an instance, right, where there's an assault with a dangerous weapon, okay, if there are significant bodily injuries, it's a different charge than when there are not. That's why the injuries are important. That's why we need the information. So to get the charge right, in any case where that charge is available to you, and there may or may not be injuries, you need to know the nature of them. So that's why it's important that we have all the information. There are a lot of nuances to this. And so we need to have it all so we can make the appropriate decisions. I don't want to be in a situation in any case, and again, I'm not talking about this one, I don't want to be in a situation in a case where I make a decision and then I'm backfilling in information afterwards. That is not the way to do a case.
But can you give us like a ballpark? Is there half a dozen people or some category of how severe?
Yeah, it's less than half a dozen, Bill. It's less than half a dozen.
In general, the parking lot and the area, is that technically Wyatt and talking about the jurisdiction of the correctional officers and their use potentially of pepper spray? Is that what you're looking at? Would that be within the Wyatt's domain?
Well, there's a lot of factors, Kate, that go into that, is understanding exactly where things happened, why they happened, under what directives, if any. So there's a lot to go into that analysis. But again, the first thing is to make sure that we've reached everybody, make sure that we have all the information. Look, and I want to say this again. To the extent anyone feels that they have information about this incident, directly or indirectly, we want to hear from them. Part of the reason we were doing triaging in the beginning was there are some people who have heard things from friends who were there. There are some people who heard accounts who were there and heard accounts of other people but didn't see it themselves. And then there are people who actually saw things directly. Those are called percipient witnesses. You always start with your percipient witnesses who actually saw something, and you work your way out from there. So that's basically been the approach, and we're going to continue in that until this is complete. But we're moving as fast as we can, and I don't expect this to take months. I expect it to take weeks to get this thing to the point where we can come back and share some more information.
We have time for one more
Several
question.
prisoners left the Wyatt and they complained about not being allowed access to legal services, and they complained about not being allowed access to medical services unless they were, quote, convulsing. Does the state plan on launching any sort of investigation into that?
Well, not at this point. I will tell you that I've had communications with folks in the immigration community, at Dorcas, at the clinic, at Roger Williams. Now, those reports have not been made to me directly. Obviously, I'm interested in that. Certainly, this office's record on challenging immigration policies where we think they're unfair, I think is plain, and it's there to see. We've been involved in a number of actions on that front, but this is not the time to talk about those things. We're here to talk about the criminal investigation that we're undertaking into two very specific instances of conduct, the operation of that vehicle and the deployment of pepper spray. And we'll be back in a couple of weeks, I hope, or maybe a few longer, to report on that. So thank you very much.
Do you mind if I ask just one more, General, real quick? Obviously, or apparently, whatever your conclusion is, not everybody's going to be happy. Is your office prepared for whatever the response is to your conclusions?
Oh, sure. I made a lot of decisions over the years, and it's rare that everybody's happy with them. But look, we just try to get it right. I try to bring the collective experience of the people here and the people who aren't here that are working hard, the detectives on the scene, my own folks, my own experience to it. We make the best decision we can under the circumstances.
And just to clarify, when you say less than half a dozen, is that injured by the truck or by pepper spray too?
Ed, I'm not really certain, but my understanding is from the statements we've taken that that's an approximate number. Don't hold me to it. That could expand, it could contract. I mean, it's just really important to understand who's reported injuries and the nature of those injuries, and that's what we're still in the
Do you know how many were hit by pepper spray?
I don't.
So really the whole investigation is kind of one-sided on the corrections officer's actions that night versus any criminal activity on behalf of the protesters.
That's the principal focus of what we're looking into right now. That's correct.
And can you comment on the right to a peaceful protest?
This is like last question times 6. Because you're newly back. That's why I end with you.
Thank you. I have a lot of questions.
Good to see you.
But you had talked about the right to a peaceful protest. Have you seen anything indicate it was anything other than a peaceful protest?
No, I haven't, but we're still evaluating it. Look, it's a great place to end, I guess, right? We have a fundamental right in this country to peacefully protest, right? When you engage in peaceful protest, and people who protest know this, and you're blocking a roadway, there was a case a number of years ago where some protesters, blocked 95. I believe it was in the wake of Ferguson. I think I was chief attorney at the time. Look, understand the emotion behind it, understand the principles that are trying to be upheld. There comes a point when you are sort of obstructing public safety and putting others in danger where you can be arrested. I think most protesters know that, but when you engage in that kind of civil disobedience, what you expect is to be handled professionally. And so that is a right that I take seriously. I know all Americans do. But our principal focus here, as I said, is on the two things that I've repeated a number of times already. So thank you very much for coming. Thank you. Great day.